You're listening to the Mile You're In podcast. Everything running related from 100 meters to 100 miles. And now, here's your host, Phil Patterson Jr.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Mile You're In podcast. As promised, I'm back in this week with the special guest that I was supposed to have last week. So, as always, before we get into the fun and everything you're waiting for, I have to quickly just make sure I shout out my 3 continuous and loyal supporters on Patreon. I won't even mention the cities because I think by now you guys already have them locked down. But Becky, Francine, and Mr. Anonymous, who continues to remain anonymous, I thank the 3 of you for continuously supporting each and every month. Again, if you guys are interested, the link is in the show notes. You know where to find it. If not, reach out to me. I'll give you the information. But right into it, because as I mentioned last week, y'all, I'm staying up late for this. You know, she's on the West Coast, so it's still early. But for me, I got to go to work in the morning. So we're going to jump right into this. Special guest, welcome to the show, Rhesa Foster.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So is it still like, because right lately, the last 2 weeks that I've gone out running, like it seems like the whole daylight, early morning, late night. What's like out when you look out the window right now? Is the sun still out for you?
Yeah, the sun's still out for me.
All right, because I noticed it's been getting darker later here.
Yeah.
So I know that time change is coming like early.
Yeah, in the next couple of weeks, I think. So.
Yeah. It's like as soon as you get used to it, they change it up on us.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we get into the deeper stuff, something that as I was, finding out more information on you. Actually, before we even get to that, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell the listeners a little bit about you.
So my name is Rhesa Foster. I am from California, born and raised, and I ran track at the University of Oregon. I ran the 100 hurdles and I also long jumped. Those are my 2 primary events. And then now I am back in California training as a professional athlete. And I also work part-time as a medical assistant in a cardiovascular center. And then I also kind of coach on the side too. So that's kind of what I'm up to lately.
All right. So we'll get into actually the question I was going to ask you. I realized, let me push that back because I think it's gonna flow better with something I asked you a little bit later on. But you talked about 100-meter hurdles and the long jumping. What really made you get into that? Because I know when you think of 100 meters, everybody thinks of just the straight sprinting, but a lot of people don't always, or at least people that aren't really into track and field, don't always think of hurdles or even long jumping. So what was it that made you get into that compared to some of the more, what some would say, more popular events?
Yeah, so growing up, actually, my main sport was soccer. That was kind of my main thing until I got into middle school. And then I got into track. I did track a little bit in elementary school, but I was really small. I'm kind of short, I'm only 5'3". So growing up, I was always really small compared to everyone else. So it just took me a while to kind of figure things out in the world of track and field. But I kind of really got into it at the end of middle school, going into high school. My dad was also, he ran for Jamaica. He ran the 110 hurdles. So track has always kind of been in my life in some capacity. But I didn't really start to kind of take it seriously for myself until I got into high school. And then I joined a summer club, and that's kind of got the ball rolling from there. So, yeah.
So being 5'3", do you find that as a disadvantage to competitors that are taller with longer legs, or is it kind of that's not a factor?
I think growing up, maybe in high school, I think it was a little bit of a disadvantage for me, because I don't know. I feel like, when you're taller, you can kind of extend a little bit more into the pit, and like it's a little bit easier to get over the hurdles. Your technique is slightly different from people who are taller. So I think like I used to be a little bit of a disadvantage, but I think I'm really strong, and I feel like from my height to weight to strength ratio, I've kind of compensated for that. So I don't necessarily think of it as a disadvantage at this point. It's just it's how it's always been. So, I don't know anything different.
Okay. Now this is a little bit jumping ahead with one of the questions too, but I always wondered this with different track and field athletes. If you could participate in any other event, which would you choose?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think probably the pole vault. I think that's one of the events that I know absolutely nothing about. I actually did the heptathlon when I was in high school, and I was recruited by a couple of schools for the heptathlon. So I've done a lot of events, but pole vault is something that I've never done, and it seems really scary, but I think it'd be pretty cool to know how to do. I think people who do the pole vault are should be applauded.
I was actually thinking about that because I went running today before doing this episode, and I was thinking, because I knew I was going to ask you that question, I was like, what would I do? And that was actually my answer, but the whole time I was thinking about it, I was just imagining like I would be afraid of the pole snapping.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it seems so scary
like that. And then I saw, it was like a couple of days ago, like it was how interesting it is for the pole vaulters that have to travel with that pole.
Yeah.
And watching this, I don't remember what country it was, but he was traveling, and I think he was going to the World Championships with it, but just having to walk through the airport with this, like, I don't know why, but I assumed it like would be kind of like a fishing pole where you can twist it and then fold it up type thing.
Yeah. And it's kind of a hassle to travel with those on planes sometimes.
But I think like, especially again, going like with the height, I would think it would just be fun to like be able to go that high and just be free and feel
and flying in the air. Yeah.
Right. So, and especially now that you mentioned doing multiple events in the past, like many people think that all you do at this point, especially like if we're focusing more on, let's say, hurdles or jumping, like those two events, many people, and I'll throw myself in there being included, until I dug deeper into and started interviewing more athletes, I figured you guys just kind of like just practice jumping hurdles the entire time, or just running and jumping. But I've discovered there's more to it when it comes to practicing that technique and everything that goes with it. So what's like a typical training routine for you? Not just for jumping, but for the hurdles as well. I would think they kind of tie in a little bit since they involve jumping, but what's that like for you, like a typical routine?
Yeah, so I mean, now I only long jump, so I don't really hurdle anymore now in competition. So as of right now, like a typical day, so like Mondays and Fridays, sometimes Wednesdays, like I'll lift either the morning or afternoon. It kind of depends. I train with a college team, so I kind of have to rely on their schedule a little bit with like the practices, but we would have like weights in the morning, and then in the afternoon we would have practice at the track. And so like Mondays are usually like a little bit harder days, like at the track, and I do a lot of like sprints and like plyometric like training. So I don't really do a lot of like jumping in the pit, like in the sand, until maybe like 6 weeks like into training. I kind of get some more like foundational work in, and then even when I do have like the jump specific stuff, I would say it's like maybe like once a week, maybe twice a week. But for the most part, I kind of train like a sprinter. Sometimes I run with like the quarter milers and we do some like repeat like 200s or 250s. Maybe like once or twice a week. Like right now we have hills on Wednesdays. Tuesdays are like sleds and plyometrics and stuff with the weight vest. And then Mondays and Fridays, I have like running stuff like on the track. Sometimes it'll be Fridays are usually a little bit faster. So like the other day I had like 6 like fast 150s. And like Mondays can be anywhere from kind of like tempo to speed endurance. So it really could just kind of depends on like where we're at in the training, and then also kind of like when I'm planning to like compete, and like looking at the long-term goals and making sure that like my training is sustainable for the whole year and the season and everything. So it kind of varies depending on where I'm at in the season.
All right. I asked that because I think it was last year. Time's going by so fast, but I had interviewed a coach who was mostly a hurdler at the time, up until becoming a coach. And now she was like, now I have to train and coach all these different events and athletes, where I'm just, coming from a hurdler background. And I watch a lot of her videos, and some of the things, just like the landing techniques and just like working on the hips for that movement. So it's things like that got me thinking like, wow, there's more that goes into it than just, okay, run really fast and jump as far as you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, kind of touching back when I was thinking about the height, I wonder how this factored, because you did do indoor and outdoor. One thing, I always get kind of mixed responses when I ask this. And obviously it depends, because weather changes all the time. So even from one heat to another, it may not always be the same. But other than like a wind effect, did you feel you performed better indoors versus outdoor? And if so, like, was there any reason, or you were kind of just consistent no matter indoor or outdoor?
I think I did a little bit better outdoors this year. I think that like on paper, like my marks were better outdoors as well. I don't think my progression was the way that I would have liked it to be. But I think overall I probably did better outdoors. I PR'd outdoors and it was wind legal. So that was nice. I think overall probably outdoors.
Okay. So now we backtrack a little bit. Because I know sometimes you like to stay closer to home. Sometimes it's just the options you get when you're recruited. There's like many different factors that come into why a student athlete chooses an individual school. So what made you choose Oregon over any other opportunity that you had out there at the time?
Yeah, so I wanted to stay in California. So when I was in high school, I was actually looking at USC. Like I was really kind of set on going there. But it was a little bit difficult for me in the recruiting process because I got injured my junior year. So my senior year, schools are usually reaching out to you like the end of your junior year, beginning of your senior year, based off of your marks from junior year. So it was a little bit tough to kind of like get schools to like talk to me because they didn't have anything to go off of. They only had marks for my sophomore year, and then they didn't know how I'd perform my senior year because track is, in the spring.
Right.
So I had to kind of like reach out to the schools and say, hey, like this is my best mark. I'm, ready to go for this year, and kind of reach out that way. And I think, I don't remember if I reached out to Oregon or they reached out to me, but I wasn't really interested in Oregon actually. Like I didn't want to go out of state. I wanted to be somewhere like in LA or something, a little bit closer to home, but just enough to where I felt like I had like my own space. LA's like 4 hours away from where I grew up. So it's a little bit of space there. But when I went to my visit in Oregon, 'cause I didn't want to go, my parents were like, oh, just, if anything, it's a free visit. You just have to see what they have to offer and all that good stuff. And in high school, I wasn't really paying attention to like national titles. Like I didn't really keep up with like the NCAA championships. So like I didn't really understand their kind of history that they had there. And so when I went on my visit, that was all kind of like shocking to me. And I realized how many professional athletes that they had come out of that school and national champions, national record holders. And there was another girl, Jenna Prandini. We were from the same town, and I knew her when she was in high school. And so she was still at Oregon at the time. And so I sat down and had a conversation with her. And ultimately it was just like, if I want to be the best of the best, like this is a place that I need to be at. And I meshed really well with the people that were there and the coach, and he was really excited for me for, you know, how I would finish like my high school career. And also kind of just looking at film from high school, he saw a lot of potential in me for my collegiate career. And I just didn't have any other coaches kind of say, hey, like this might be what your marks are right now, but I see you doing a lot more. And so he was really enthusiastic about kind of my future. And I think that's kind of just what sold me. I ended up verbally committing on my visit there. So that was definitely unexpected because I didn't really want to go there in the first place. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. But yeah, it was pretty cool. So I'm definitely glad I made that choice.
And that's something I always wonder is that the school, like I think like locally here, I know not as much recently as like the early 2000s, but like football, everybody kind of wanted to go there. Or at the time, USC was also still really good with Reggie Bush and Lionheart and all those guys. So you think of track and field, and especially then you got, I forget the name. Don't hate me. It's Hayward, like the whole
Field, yeah.
Yeah. So like, you know, then you got that, like that's like a historical location.
Yeah.
And I think y'all got like, isn't this like the 7th time in like 9 years they're gonna have like the championships or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've seen this whole debate about that on Twitter. Like,
yeah,
there's nowhere else y'all can go. So like, it's just, there's so much, like you said, so much history of people that have come out of there.
Mm-hmm.
I know I reached like a couple years ago, I had Sabrina Sutherland on.
Okay, yeah. We were roommates.
Oh, you were? Okay, because
we were roommates for a year.
I had her and Chanel Price, and they kind of told me about their friendship and how they pushed each other. And just like, I always wonder, like, do some people choose when they have those options? Do they choose maybe a lesser popular school where they might fly under the radar a little bit, knowing I'll still get the attention somewhere else, but maybe not have so much pressure on me? So you wouldn't say like that altered any, I mean, I know you made the decision, but that wasn't in the back of your mind at all, like not performing to a level that's kind of expected at a school like that?
Yeah, I think for me, like I liked that kind of pressure. I felt like if I want to be the best, like I want to train next to the best people in the country, like the best collegiates, and I want to train next to them every day. That way, once I get into a competition, like there is no reason to be nervous or scared or afraid or anxious, because like the girl that I train next to every day is the fastest in the NCAA. So no one is more intimidating than the girl I train with every day. So that was kind of like my mindset going into things. And I wanted to be challenged every day and work up towards, you know, what some of the people on my team were accomplishing. And I wanted to pick their brains and kind of grow alongside them. And I'm like, hey, you know, just take me for the ride, take me with you, you know? Right. So that was kind of my mindset going into it. So.
And that's the thing, you know, I take things and I relate them to each other when it comes to sports and life. And that's a big thing, is we always say, if you surround yourself with a certain group of people, it's going to challenge you to become better. Yes. And if you're with the wrong people, you're going to fall down the wrong path. And it's the same thing with sports. I talk about it a lot, where when I was racing 5Ks locally, there was one guy in my age group that was beating me every single week. And I knew if I could hang with him, that, you know, the goals that I had set for myself, I was going to reach. Because if I kept training by myself or with people that were slower than me, it was not going to push me to those levels, and I was going to get over the hurdle. So yeah, like you said, I like that, because it is a lot of times people do avoid those challenges. My last episode, I talked about being content. So I think some people avoid that, but it's not a content thing. They're just complacent and they don't want the stress that comes with challenging and going for goals. So it's good to see when people don't just sit at that level of success and they try to achieve more, and they find the right people that can push them. Now, you talked about injuries in high school, and that's kind of something that followed you a little bit into college as well, because I know, again, doing some of the research of your history, in just a 6-month period, you tore your plantar fascia, which I've had an issue with that, and that's not fun.
Yeah, it's not.
Then you strained your hamstring, and then you tore an ankle ligament.
Yeah.
What toll did that take on you, and how did you remain positive through that? Because I know for a lot of people, it's like after you get so many back to back and you can't get back into a rhythm, some people just give up and say, okay, my body's not built for this anymore.
Yeah, that time was really tough because it was my senior year, and this was right after COVID. So COVID kind of shut everything down right at the end of indoors. Like, I was at the NCAA indoor championships at the time that, we got sent back home. This was the day before I was supposed to compete. So I lost my indoor season, and so I still had an outdoor season. And so I really only had, I think, like 3 or 4 months to compete and kind of like give it my best shot. And then I had all these injuries back to back. And so that was like really tough. It was hard because it's like, this is it, and then I also had the goal of going pro after I finished. And I knew that if I wanted to make some money or get a contract or negotiate for a contract, I would have to put good numbers out there, and I'd have to perform. And so with all of these injuries kind of piling on, it was definitely really difficult, but I kind of just relied heavily on my faith and just said, it's going to work out the way that it's supposed to work out. Like, I'm doing everything in my power to try to, stay healthy and stay on top of things, and these things kind of just keep getting thrown at me. So ultimately, I was just kind of like, it is what it is at this point. There's no point in kind of like sulking or being like sad about it, because at that point I had, I think I tore the ankle ligament at Pac-12. And so 2 weeks later was regionals, and then 2 weeks after that was nationals. So I'm like, I don't have time to like think too much about it. Like, I just have to take it day by day and do as much as I can up until, these championship meets. So that's kind of how I dealt with that. I had to just kind of brush it off because of the time crunch. So yeah.
And do you think, or did the medical staff, trainers, or maybe even you, because you're going towards that profession, as far as being a doctor, you might have even known this at this point. Do you feel like those 3 injuries were caused by each other? Because I know when it comes to like plantar fasciitis, a lot of times we're told about stretching your calves and your hamstrings, like those back leg muscles, because they sometimes can contribute to that. Do you feel like those were related at all, or just 3 random injuries at the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. At the time, I feel like they probably weren't related, because the plantar fascia, that was an injury that I was dealing with kind of throughout the fall season and then moving into outdoors. And then right as I was kind of recovering from that then I had the hamstring strain. And so, I mean, they might have been related, because, when you have an injury, your body naturally kind of overcompensates, right, to kind of make you comfortable. So it's possible that those two could have been related, but then when I injured my ankle, it was actually just how I landed in the pit. So when I landed, my feet kind of just dug a little bit too deep in the sand. And so when I went to sweep, and my butt kind of swept through, I landed right on my foot. And so like my ankle got stuck in the sand, and, all that impact kind of just went straight into my foot. So that's kind of how I tore some of those ligaments in my ankle. But yeah, so kind of seemingly unrelated, possibly two that could be related, but yeah, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was wondering because again, I've dealt with it. Mine, knock on wood, has been with the help of inserts in my running shoes has helped. But I know, like you said, the compensating starts, as I would run before I figured out the insert thing and everything, and stretching certain ways.
Right.
I was landing, my stride and gait became different to try to avoid aggravating the fascia, and then I started having patellar issues or IT band issues and things like that. So it made me wonder, because I'm like, those three are kind of all tied in. But then it made me wonder, and you just touched on it, like, I'm surprised that jumpers don't have more injuries, or at least I just don't hear about them as much, because like you said, like the impact and the way, like when I watch you guys, especially in slow motion, because it doesn't look as bad in full speed, but sometimes when I watch slow motion videos of you guys and the way your legs sometimes look like they're hyperextending or buckling under you guys, like I've never done the research, but like how deep, if like is the sand bed that you guys are landing in, like is there a preference of like harder, like if it rains and the sand is kind of harder and compacted, like do you have a preference, and like what's your experience with that, like preference?
Yeah, I'm not sure actually how like deep the sand pits go. I thought about that a few times, but I don't know if I've actually ever like researched it. But yeah, definitely when you're jumping, you want the sand to be like pretty like wet. So sometimes you'll see like when prepping for like meets, or sometimes in between like events, they'll be watering down the sand pit. So it's not too like I guess like dry, because if it's dry, then you kind of tend to just like slide over the top, versus like if the sand is like wet and like really like soft, it's like it really softens the impact. So if they don't like wet down the sand and like dig it up, then this top part might be kind of like soft, but then the like the next layer under is like gets really hard and like compact. So yeah, you just have to do a good job when you're kind of like preparing the pit before competitions or like even practices and stuff. You kind of have to dig deep with the shovel when you're kind of turning the pit. So.
And do you guys have, because this was something I learned as well, depending on distances and events, the spikes are different. So are the spikes a lot different from like hurdlers and like the shorter sprinter distances? Like,
yeah. So with like so long jump spikes are different from triple jump spikes, which are different from sprint spikes, which are different from high jump spikes. It kind of just depends on the kind of impact that you make when you're planting. So for example, sprint spikes, like they don't really have a heel on them. And jump spikes, they do have a heel, because when you're planting, your whole entire foot is kind of impacting the ground, versus like sprinting, it's kind of just the ball of your foot or like your toes. And so that's kind of where most of the support is in sprint spikes. And then jump spikes, the plate underneath also is a lot more stiff, because again, you're dealing with a lot more impact when you're taking off and when you're landing and like when you're bounding, things like that. And then triple jump spikes, the plate is it's stiffer, but it's also a lot thicker, because you're having 3 jumps instead of 1, and you have to jump off both feet. So yeah, it kind of just depends on like the biomechanics of the event and where the support in your feet is needed.
So if you're thinking of doing multiple events like you said there, so now I'm thinking how much money you guys are having to spend on all those different spikes. That's why we joke. We say you thought running was going to be a cheap sport, but it's like
Yeah.
when you count up all the, especially if you, I didn't realize, I knew there were like a few differences, but I didn't know for the different jumps and all of that. So wow. And I just actually looked it up. The minimum the pit has to be is not even a foot, like 0.98 feet. So
Yeah.
I just assumed because it's concrete under there. I've seen them. That's where I'm surprised people don't get hurt. Now that I see it's not even that deep, and the force some of you guys land in. So
Yeah.
that's crazy. Now you mentioned the becoming a Nike athlete, and I know because I remember I was reading part of what you were talking about in one of your posts about that. How did that feel? And did you expect that opportunity to get signed with the way things were going, especially leading up to what you expected and how your senior year and everything went? Is that something you were expecting with maybe not even specifically Nike, but just in general, like any brand offering you a contract? And then when you got it, how did, other than we know you were excited, but how did you feel?
Yeah, I was definitely excited. I knew that it would be a little bit, I wouldn't say like a long shot, but I knew it wasn't going to be something that was like a given. I knew some negotiation would have to happen in order for me to get a contract, just because of the way that my season ended. I didn't make it into finals in the NCAA championships, and I was like, okay, maybe if I do really well at the US championships. That was, I think, the Olympic trials at the time, that was the same year as the Olympic trials. So that was 2 or 3 weeks later. And so I'm like, okay, well, let me try to make the final for this. And then I ended up fouling all 3 jumps. So that definitely didn't do me any favors when I'm, trying to get a contract. And, I understand the business side of things, and there's, you want to see the numbers and the performances, and you want your athlete to be, reliable and everything like that. So I knew it was not a given. Obviously, it was a goal of mine going into the year. But being at Oregon and all the strong connections that they had with Nike, and my coach had good relationships with some of the people who dealt with contracts and the agents and things like that. So he, at the time, helped negotiate that contract and some of the terms. And so that's kind of how it turned out. But yeah, I was really excited that to get anything. I'm like, even if you just give me clothes, like I'll be happy with that. I know that ultimately, like, I didn't perform when it counted. And so like I get that from, if someone is looking at me trying to, make a contract and give me money, like, it's just, I understand that it's also a business, and there's not a lot of money in track and field, especially in field events. So I knew I would have to put my best foot forward, and I didn't do that. So I was really grateful that my coach was there to really put in a good word for me and help negotiate some of those terms.
All right. So, and actually I should say, and I said it, I think I said it, but congratulations on that, because I know that's huge. I've interviewed many athletes that to this day are still trying to get some sort of deal, some contract. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Now, what I was going to ask you, and then I decided to push it back a little bit. Again, doing the research, I discovered, like me, you're a Gemini. And I know we get a lot of, as soon as people hear that, they instantly put us in this little category. I am guilty of at times having that mood swing, or sometimes they call us bipolar attitude. For me, it's now that I'm more into the ultra distances. So I'm out there doing 100-mile races. It gives me way more time to have that roller coaster of emotions, to where I can go from the highest high to the lowest low.
Yeah.
So I think of, in your case, the meets can last, because you're, like you said, you have multiple jumps, and especially if you're doing, a big event like that, you might not do everything in one day. It might be spread out. You might have rounds and heats and things like that. Is that something you've dealt with, like with the mood swings, or you're always just kind of steady, calm, cool, collected under pressure?
Yeah, I feel like I've never really related to like a lot of the qualities that Geminis have.
Lucky you.
So I feel like I'm like, that doesn't really apply to me. So I don't know. I don't really like keep up with like a lot of that stuff. But as far as like the mood swings, I think that for the most part, I'm pretty like cool, calm, and collected when I'm competing. I I remember one of my friends told me like, "Are you even like excited?" I'm like screaming inside, but like on the outside, I'm just like I usually try to keep my composure. Like, but I think sometimes I did definitely struggle with like getting really frustrated like internally, and that's something that I've continued to work on. If I have maybe like a series of 6 jumps, and like the first jump, okay, maybe it was a foul or it wasn't that good. And then the second jump, okay, maybe that one wasn't that good. And so like I would like mentally, it would like take a toll on me. Like I would really be beating myself up. Like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? I need to get it together. Like I just did this in practice the other day. And like I'm kind of just like spiraling inside, even though on the outside it's like, oh yeah, she looks great. But so yeah, I think that's something that I definitely struggled with in the past, but I think I'm a work in progress. I think I've gotten a lot better at that, especially over the last year, and I think it's definitely shown in some of my performances. So yeah, I can definitely relate to the mood swing thing. I think it's just a little bit more internal for me.
Yeah, and again, another reason I asked that, because even I think back when I was in high school, I wrestled, and I'll never forget the one tournament I was in, and I was wrestling this kid from Miami, and Miami wrestlers, at least at the time, were known for being a little chippy and doing some stuff after the whistle. And this one particular guy would just, it was late shots, cheap shots, and one time threw me into, like, we were heading out of bounds, and when you wrestle, your boundaries, where you're at. Right. And I think he knew we're getting close to the out of bounds. And as the ref was blowing the whistle and he felt me let up, I felt him grip stronger and just throw me straight into the first row of the bleachers.
Oh my
and
God.
Like everybody went crazy, and like they're expecting me to now get up and, retaliate, do something.
Back,
yeah. And I just get up and I'm like you said, like internally, I'm like, okay, if I react to this, I'm going to either get disqualified or I'm going to lose that composure. And that's what the mind games he wants to get in my head. And I got up and just started kind of like laughing. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until somebody told me. They're like they told me what I was doing. And it was almost like I didn't realize it. It was out of body experience.
Like all a blur. Yeah.
But it's like I see that, and then I go into another match where somebody does that and I'm frustrated and things aren't working, and now I start retaliating. And it's like that mood swing where if I'm in the good mood, I can dial it in and control it. But if I'm not in a good mood, then like everything just falls apart and I lose focus, and everything that I perfected during training just went out the window. So I always wonder how that works, because I know for me, at least personally, the farther I went in a tournament or a meet or whatever it was, I got more like locked up. Like the pressure for me wasn't good. So when I see what you professionals at this point are even able to do, like I couldn't imagine being at World Championships in front of all those people, knowing they're watching you at that point. I give you guys a lot of props for that.
Thanks.
Something you mentioned very briefly, but I know, and I've seen more again as I follow you. You mentioned in your bio Romans 8:28, and I feel like that fits your story very well, because despite the outcome at the end of even now, I didn't really know too much about your high school, junior, senior year and the injuries. But knowing the outcome at the end of high school, college, the Olympic trials, it's not over, and now it's actually taking another step in that journey. And even I think something that's worked for me with the whole mood swing thing is my faith, knowing that plays a role in it. So how do you feel that's played a role in your journey, especially like when it came to the injuries and staying positive and knowing that it's not always in your hands? There's him that's playing a role in a lot of what happens in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, I feel like for me, I've always kind of felt like the underdog a little bit. Like I've always been in the mix, but never really like a threat to anyone. Like I've been good, but I've never been like the best, or like I've never, won a national title or had, a national record or school record. I came very close to Oregon, but just missed it. But there was always kind of like something thrown at me, like an injury or, and a lot of times my injuries at Oregon, like I never redshirted. A lot of my injuries were kind of like, okay, maybe we'll, back off for like a couple weeks or a few weeks and then like you'll be good to go. But a lot of times like that was like at a crucial point in the season to where it's like, okay, I really have to focus on the long jump now, because if I'm trying to hurdle and I'm trying to manage this injury, that can be problematic, because long jump, like I'm a contender for scoring points for the team. And so we were always kind of playing that game and seeing, where can we get the most like out of this situation. And that was always definitely tough, because I've always felt like I was kind of just being pulled in different directions. And as soon as I really start to see myself like advance in like a lot of things or get better at certain things, it's like, oh my gosh, like then this other thing happens, so that was definitely really tough. And even my first couple of years as a professional athlete, I felt like that also happened a lot with me. And when I graduated college, my one of my coaches, my hurdles coach, this is during my senior year, and I was talking to him, and it was kind of towards the end of my senior year. I still wanted to hurdle, but I know that like long jump was kind of like, my main event, and where I would kind of where my future would be in the long jump. But this was kind of my last opportunity to run the hurdles, and I felt really good. Training was good, but kind of dealing with the injury and wanting me to be healthy. I was kind of talking to him, and, he told me, he was like, I don't remember what exactly he said, but something to the extent of just like, you are a really good athlete. You can run so much faster than the times that you put out there, and you can jump so much further, but it's like, you just haven't been given like a fair shot. He was like, you just can't catch a break for, whatever reason. And like that like meant a lot to me, because even though, a lot of my numbers weren't where I wanted them to be, like he saw that in me, and he saw that I had a lot of potential and like work ethic and discipline to like be successful. And he was just like, if you put everything together, like you could be a dangerous athlete. And I was like, yes, that's what I love to hear. You see me. But it was definitely like really hard for me for a long time to kind of like find that balance of like, okay, when things aren't like working out, like, is it because like this just isn't meant for me? Like, is it because I've just kind of like, I've peaked already? Maybe my body just can't handle it. It's just not in the cards for me. So I think I've dealt with that for a long time, kind of just like, am I thinking that I'm better than I actually am? And I think last year, after I kind of like dealt with a lot of the external expectations, but also just like I put so much pressure on myself because I'm like, okay, I went to Oregon, I'm with Nike, like I have to be winning everything and I have to like represent my alma mater. And, when people see like, oh, like you're a professional athlete, like, oh, like you're going to the Olympics, like you're going to world
Right.
championships. And like, there's only so many spots that are on the team and like it all has to be put together like on the right day at the right time at that exact moment. And there are so many athletes who like never made a team and they're certainly good enough to be on a national team and go to worlds or the Olympics. But at the end of the day, like you have to put it together at the right time and you have to be healthy. And so, yeah, it was definitely like, it's been a process for me. And so I feel like that I always like look back to that verse because I'm just like, okay, well, I'm still here and I still have my contract right now. I'm still competing. I'm healthy. So like, I know that I'm here for a reason and I'm supposed to be getting something out of this. And so that's why I always kind of like really lean heavily on my faith. And like I said, that verse specifically, ever since I was in college, I really had to kind of just like, take my hands off the wheel and just say, hey, like I've done everything I can in my human power to like be successful. And at the end of the day, like God is going to put me wherever I'm supposed to be and when I'm supposed to be there. So that's kind of my mindset now. Obviously, it's a lot harder. It's easier said than done, obviously. But, it's something that, you just have to actively work towards, especially when things aren't necessarily going your way.
And not to get preachy here, but I always like, and actually, you know what, I'm going to take a second to shout out Chris, or actually I should see your wife. I need her to forgive me. I forget her name and I'm not going to say it wrong, but a good friend of mine, Chris Williams, and his wife have a show called the Unignorant Podcast. So if you guys are listening and you like other podcasts and you do believe in God or have faith, check them out because it's a funny but very powerful podcast. And when I was listening to it, the last episode, he had one of those moments where as you're discussing faith, you just get a message. And as I was just listening to you talk about that, it's almost like I just received one because I thought about when I was trying to go sub 20 in a 5K. And I've talked about this in many ways on the podcast a lot. And I was training as hard as I could. I was entering every weekend into another 5K. I was getting faster, but I just couldn't do it. And the day I finally did it, not only did I break it, but I broke it by 19 seconds. So it was not like I figured when I finally did it, it was going to be 19:59 on the dot type of thing.
Yeah.
But that day, it just, like you said, everything came together perfectly. Mm-hmm. And I was very grateful. I was very appreciative. One of the things I always would pray about is to stay humble, because I did have a lot of success in a lot of the things I did when it came to athletics. But I noticed I would get that ego, I would become cocky, and then I would be humbled very quickly. So I always would pray to stay humble. And I just realized now, as I was listening to you, that I went down that path because I finally broke the 20-minute mark. And I remember probably the next day, I went and looked, because it was down here locally, there's two major Turkey Day or Turkey Trot 5Ks, and that was the day I did it. There's one in Fort Lauderdale and one in a city called Tamarack. Tamarack is normally where all the sub-elite runners will go. That's where the fastest runners will go, and then the Fort Lauderdale one is everyone else goes to. So I finished this race. I run, I think it was 1941, which normally in 5Ks down here, you're going to be top 5, top 6, something like that. So I finished, and I look at the results. I'm not even top 3 in my age group. I'm like, how did I run this fast? And I'm not even, and it was almost right there, it was there you go. The ego is kicking in. You're not, you just finally accomplished the goal you were focused on. And now you're worrying about all this other stuff that doesn't even matter. And I never made that connection until just now. And I'm thinking, like, because I almost went to the Tamarack race, but I didn't because I was like, no, that's where everybody goes. If I go to this Fort Lauderdale one, I could be top 3. I could like be on the podium. And when I looked at the results, had I gone to the Tamarack one with that time, I would have been top 3. But then I was like, no, because like we talked about earlier, all the faster runners came to this race, which is what finally pushed me to get past that barrier. Had I gone to the Tamarack race, I would have been back with the people that don't push me.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't have broke it, and I would have been frustrated and just still searching. So it's that knowing he put you where you need to be at the right time.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
teach you those lessons. So that's just,
Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. I think sometimes I feel like oftentimes it's when you least expect it. Like my last meet, not this past season, but the season before, I had just decided, okay, like it was after US championships, and I was like, okay, well, this is another meet. It's relatively close. Like I'll just enter in and just see what happens. Like it'll be the last one. It's low pressure, like low stakes. I'll just drive down to San Diego and I'll just go jump there. And every single jump ended up being a PR, and then I fouled, like it was basically a 23-foot or 7-meter jump. And like I got out of the pit, and like to me, like I was like, okay, like I felt like a decent jump. And I got out of the pit, and one of the coaches who was there helping out and raking, he was like, that was an amazing jump. And I looked back at the film and I was like, that was far. Like what the heck? Like I didn't even know I could, like I've always wanted to jump that far, but like I didn't think that I was ready to jump that far. But I feel like even though it was a foul and like it's not like on paper or anything, like to me it was just like, okay, like I am supposed to be here. Like this is what I'm good at. Like I belong here. I belong competing with the professionals. And like at the time I was really just like have I peaked? Like do I still belong here? Like I was really questioning, like, do I keep going? Because I could just apply to medical school and just go that route and just like be done with this, because like I was feeling really defeated. And I went to this meet and I was just like, all right, like I'm just gonna like turn off my brain basically, and just like I had like 2 maybe like cues where I was like, okay, just like be aggressive and just punch the knee at the board. And that's all I did the whole time. And every single jump was better than any other jump I had jumped in my entire life. So I was like, okay, well, all right, I could keep doing this for a little bit longer. So yeah, I get that. Sometimes it's when you least expect it, and but things work out the way they're supposed to.
So we look at, as we get closer to wrapping this up, you mentioned working towards becoming a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things you've mentioned is you also coach. You're a professional athlete. How do you balance it all? The school, coaching, training, competing, but also keeping time for you personally? Because I know that's a thing. If you don't take that, you get the burnout, the fatigue, you start to lose interest. Sometimes the grind and that motivation isn't enough. So how do you balance that all and stay sane at that point?
Well, I still don't know. People ask me all the time, like, how are you doing all this? I'm like, I don't know. And people like ask me to do things, ask me to coach, ask me to, babysit, whatever. Like there's always a million things going on, and like I always say yes. And I'm like, I really need to work on that, because like I need to like say yes to myself every now and then and just be like, I'm just gonna stay home and sit on the couch and do nothing. Nobody talks to me, nobody asks me to do anything. But yeah, it's definitely challenging. Like I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But also like this like busy lifestyle that I live like is the only one that I've ever known, really. Like, I'm so used to, you have school all day and then you have practice and then you have homework, and like you're kind of just like on this constant grind. And so like at a certain point I kind of felt like if I was like sitting down, like being still, like I just felt like I was like useless. Like I'm like, I have to do something. I need to like help somebody out. I need to go coach somebody or whatever it is. But I feel like now I've kind of like scaled back a little bit. Like I coach a little bit, but I'm like very cognizant of, okay, how's my body feeling? How, like, what do I need right now? Do I need to like recover? Do I need to say, hey, like I'm gonna take a week off, or, whatever it is. So I'm definitely like learning how to kind of put my physical like health first, because I know as a professional athlete, like you have to be at your best. You compete and you train at a very high intensity and a lot of volume, and so your body just has to be able to handle that. And if you have too much going on, ultimately, like it's just not gonna really do you a lot of good in the long run, especially when you get to those meets later in the season, in the spring, when it counts. So yeah, I've definitely kind of like scaled back a little bit and kind of given certain people boundaries, and was like, hey, like I only have this much time. I can help out during this time frame, but this is like only for me and my recovery and like getting my massage and seeing the chiropractor, doing whatever therapy I need, and really like taking care of myself. But yeah, so I've only ever known being extremely busy, but I think ultimately it's just not sustainable, and I think I started to kind of realize that last year. So yeah, I'm a work in progress.
Yeah, because was the becoming a doctor something that you decided after school, or was that something you were working towards in school? Or was it a mid-school decision change? How did that come about?
I have always wanted to be a doctor since I was like in high school. So in undergrad, I majored in general science, and I focused on human physiology. And then I also had a minor in chemistry and legal studies, and then I got my master's in prevention science. So that's kind of something that I've always been working towards. I think for a short period of time, I was really considering doing like a PhD in like clinical psychology, maybe being like a therapist or something like that. And I think that kind of went along with like a lot of the like mental struggles that I had like in college that we kind of touched on a little bit. And I was just like, I want to be someone that like people can come to like when they were like in my shoes, because like I definitely like needed a little bit like more help, and like I wanted to be that person for someone else. And so I think that ultimately I kind of came back to my original goal to becoming a doctor, being a physician, because I felt like I just could make more impact that way, especially as like a Black female. Like there's not a lot of Black doctors in general, let alone Black female doctors. So I felt like I could really make a big impact in being a physician and kind of a leader like in the community. So.
Okay. Well, it's not, when I think about it, you're still young. So I know a lot of people will put on that you got to grind when you're young and you got to, do it while you can mentality, where I've started to meet a lot of people in their late 30s, 40s, even 50s going back to school and doing, I should have done this when I was young. So it's a mix. You really have to, again, you could be motivated, but that's only going to take you so far. You have to be dedicated to it, and you have to really want what you're doing. I think that's why a lot of people, even afterwards, when they graduate college, they don't really continue with the sport that they were in love with, because they kind of fall out of love with it just because of the grind all the time. Or you see some athletes that switch sports and do things like that. So again, more props to you, because you put a lot on your plate. And obviously I can say when I was younger, you definitely have that more just naturally, that natural energy. So that is on your side, because now, when you start getting towards my age, start looking towards to those naps and things like that in the middle of the day.
I still look forward to naps. So.
Okay. One other question. I know I didn't really throw this out there for us to possibly discuss, but it's just something I thought about, because I do typically ask different athletes when it comes to this, and because I am kind of new to focusing on more of the non-distance type events. Everybody kind of I feel like the 100, the 4x1, all those. And then I don't feel like a lot of people know about the other, especially the field events. I feel like they get ignored. I'll see a lot of posts about shot puts and javelin throws and all these things. And I'm like, sometimes you forget they're even a part of this, because you don't see them really shown on TV, and you might see the USA track and field Twitter or Instagram post these if they get a medal in one of the big events, but otherwise you're really just seeing the sprinters. And I know for me, what really started to get me into the long jumping was I started seeing a lot of stuff about or with Tara Davis. And then I was researching, and I'm like, okay, well, who are the other top jumpers? And I'm like, I've never heard of any of these people. Even the international ones. I'm like, that's the only person that I had heard. So I had to start doing my own research. So would you say there are any of and they don't have to be US based, so any long jumpers that you kind of look up to in the sport, or would like to train with, knowing that, working with someone that's maybe gone a little bit farther or had a little more success would push you? Is there anyone you look up to or would like to work with as you progress in the jumping?
I think one person that has always kind of piqued my interest, and honestly I didn't really growing up, I didn't watch track meets or anything. Even in college, I didn't really keep up with the international meets or the diamond leagues. I was kind of just focused on myself and what I was doing. I just wasn't super well versed in a lot of the amazing athletes that have gone to the Olympics and stuff, especially in the field events, like you said. But someone that I think I just kind of came across her page on Instagram or something, but Jasmine Sawyers from Great Britain. I don't know, there's just something about her that is just very she just seems very personable, and she's very open about kind of her struggles in the sport, when she was kind of transitioning into being a professional athlete, and how a lot of her performances always they're not always linear. It's not always going to be this upward trend that that you just see snapshots on TV or on Instagram or social media or whatever. And so she's always been kind of very transparent about the day-to-day life of a professional athlete or professional long jumper. And so I don't know, I've always kind of just been drawn to her personality on social media. And she doesn't I don't know, she has kind of this carefree spirit. She doesn't really care about the cameras and the lights and stuff. She just kind of just wants to be herself. And also she just has a very similar build to myself, and she talked a little bit about how she used to be insecure about her body, and I feel we look very similar, and we had some the same struggles mentally that she talked about. And so I feel there's a lot of things that I see in her that I also see in myself. So I feel that's probably one of the reasons why I really like her.
Okay. Well, I asked that too, because I know, and you mentioned it, a lot of people are not, especially, I see it more in track and field. And I sometimes I wonder if it is more of a faith thing, because I feel I see more people in track and field expressing their faith versus other sports. And I tend to see, especially on social media, track and field athletes are a little bit more open with everything. And I thought about even like recently where something I saw with Masai Russell, who was talking about, it's like she took accountability for her technique. She was like, my speed is there, but my technique needs to improve. I need to focus on that. And then with a thing Mo mentioning, like she was losing motivation. Like she's like, I really didn't have anything pushing me at this event. Those are the things I like, because I feel like it shows all of us who are just everyday, weekend warriors or whatever you want to call us. Like sometimes it's again, like I said, the motivation is only going to take you so far. And a lot of people will get on social media and fake that, or they'll make excuses. They won't take accountability. They will only post the good things. And if the proof is out there that they didn't succeed or had a bad day, they'll come up with a reason why it didn't work, other than, maybe I didn't work hard enough behind the scenes, or I didn't take it as serious as I should have. So that's why I always ask, because I know some people, whether it's an ego thing or they're just not mentally there, they don't look up to other people. They feel like it's almost a negative to look up to somebody, especially that's competitive in their sport or their distance, whatever it may be, event.
Yeah, definitely.
So as we wrap it up then here, is there any last word you have, anything you'd like people to know, like anything you have coming up, any event or anything, if you want to share any social media that, if somebody wanted to follow you, the mic is yours to say whatever you want.
No, I don't really have like any big things going on or anything like that. But no, thanks for having me. I really, really enjoyed this, getting to kind of dig a little bit deeper into my story and everything. For social media, it's at Rhesa_Justine. I'm not like on social media all the time. I'm just not like a big, social media personality type person. I'm kind of introverted. So, but yeah, I mean, other than that, I just want to thank you for having me.
Well, I thank you. I always, I try to, again, bring people on that I feel like have stories or experiences that others can relate to. Obviously, we're not going to Oregon. A lot of people I know are not working towards becoming a doctor. Yeah. You're doing big things. You've done big things, but you're still humble, and you don't let pride get in the way. You realize that we like you said, things have to work in our favor. You can. I say it a lot when I was, again, I'll go back to the whole 5K thing. I was training, everything was on point. I felt like I was peaking, and I went to this one race, and everything during the week was calm. There was nothing. The morning we get up, there were 25-mile-per-hour wind gusts, and it was an out and back course. So I was like, well, there goes my chance. Like, I'm like, the only thing I could think of is if I like conserve enough energy in the headwind portion,
right,
when we turn around
later,
maybe it'll push me.
Yeah.
And it ended up being one of the worst races I had, actually. And it's just one of those things where it's, again, like, whatever it is you're trying to get out of life and out of yourself, if that's something you pray for, if that's something you hope for, he'll find a way to get that out of you at the least expected time or place or method. So I'll put your link in the show notes, so anyone who wants to follow you, they can follow you. Again, I thank you for taking the time out, because you got a very busy schedule, and if anything, I feel like if you didn't do those things, you'd be one of those people that go stir crazy and you'd start finding things.
Yes.
Like, I think of the people that like they retire and then they go back to work because they're like,
exactly. Like, I'm too bored. Like, I can't stay here half the day. That just might be me.
Well, again, congratulations on everything to this point. Good luck with everything coming up. Thank you again for taking the time out to go on the show. And I guess until the next episode, guys, I don't really have I know I try to hit you guys with something deep, powerful. I don't really know. I don't know. Maybe it's late. I'm tired. I don't have anything inspiration for you. All I can say is just be humble. But again, like I said last week, I'll just follow up with that. Just have your goals, chase them, work on them. Don't be afraid of failure, bumps in the road. Like she said, she had the injuries, different things. You can still get to where you're trying to go in life, whatever it may be. If you're in a relationship, you're going to have those up and downs. You're going to have those fights. You guys, some people break up multiple times and then still stay together. Some people drop classes. Sometimes they take breaks from school. People quit jobs and go to other countries for a while. You don't know what your journey is going to be. But if you have a goal you're chasing, focus on the baby steps to get there, but make sure you stop and acknowledge and cherish the success you have along the way each time you hit those goals, and make sure, I know a lot of people say don't look back, but in my opinion, it's not a bad thing to look back and remember where you came from and how far you have come, and realize, because sometimes when I'm running, these long races, I'll say, for example, it's 100 miles, and I'll say, oh my God, I'm only at mile 60. And then I have to stop, because I'm like, I still got 40 miles to go. But then it's like, yeah, but you just did 60. You could be back at 20 and still have 8. So, just focus on.
Celebrate the small wins.
What's that?
Is it celebrate the small wins?
Oh yeah. That's why this show is called The Mile You're In, because I tell everybody, it's just like life. You have each day, each week, each month, whatever it is you're going through, that's your mile. So in your case, when you were doing hurdles, each hurdle, that was a different day, a different obstacle in life that you were going through, another injury, whatever it may be. So it's all related. It can all be used. Life and sports are very similar. So again, guys, thanks for listening. Please share this with your friends, family, everybody. Let your dogs, cats listen to it. You never know, they might like it. Y'all have a good week, and I'll hopefully see y'all next week with another episode.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mile You're In podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, share, and subscribe.